the arrogant boss who fired his best employee mid-deal and watched his empire crumble. Before we begin, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Drop a comment below. What's the most shocking betrayal you've ever witnessed? Share your thoughts with our community. Jake Morrison adjusted his tie and glanced at his Apple Watch. 2:47 p.m. In 30 minutes, the executives from Titan Industries would walk through those mahogany doors to sign the biggest deal of his career, a $680 million acquisition that had consumed his life for the past 16 months. At 26, Jake was the youngest senior associate in the history of Sterling Associates, the premier investment firm in downtown Chicago. While his Harvard MBA classmates were still grinding through analyst programs, Jake was already closing 9-figure deals and building relationships with CEOs who'd been in business longer than he'd been alive. The conference room buzzed with nervous energy. Legal documents covered the polished table like a paper battlefield, each clause representing weeks of negotiation. Jake's laptop displayed the final PowerPoint presentation, every slide perfect, every number verified 3 times over. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Robert Sterling III, the firm's managing partner, his voice carrying the authority of old money and older connections. At 52, Sterling looked like he'd stepped out of a country club catalog, silver hair, navy Armani suit, and a Rolex that cost more than most people's cars. Jake looked up from his notes, catching something strange in Sterling's tone. Around the table, the other partners, Williams from legal, Chen from operations, Rodriguez from HR, all wore expressions that screamed trouble brewing. "Before we proceed with the Titan signing," Sterling continued, his cold blue eyes settling on Jake like a sniper's scope, "I need to address a personnel issue that can't wait." The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jake felt his pulse quicken, but kept his face neutral. In the cutthroat world of mergers and acquisitions, showing weakness was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. "Jake," Sterling's voice took on a theatrical quality, like he was performing for an audience, "your employment with Sterling Associates ends today. Effective immediately." The words hit like a sledgehammer to the chest. Jake's pen froze halfway through signing a document. Around the table, he caught the subtle reactions. Williams wincing like he'd been slapped, Chen suddenly fascinated by his coffee mug, Rodriguez's hand moving protectively over what was obviously a termination folder. "I see," Jake managed, his voice steady despite feeling like the floor had just disappeared beneath him. "May I ask why you're doing this 13 minutes before the biggest deal of the year?" Sterling's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Because I've decided that Sterling Associates needs leadership that understands loyalty. Real loyalty, not this misguided devotion to clients over company interests." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Last month, Jake had quietly refused to inflate the projected synergies on the Titan deal when Sterling had suggested bumping the numbers to increase their fee. It was the kind of ethical stand that built long-term relationships but apparently threatened short-term egos. Jake's mind raced as he processed the betrayal. In 4 minutes, General Patricia Hayes, Titan Industries CEO and a decorated former Army commander, would walk into this room expecting to close the deal that would define her company's future. Instead, she'd find Robert Sterling, a man who'd never served anything but his own interests. This was about to get very interesting. Jake had exactly 3 minutes to think before the conference room doors opened and General Patricia Hayes strode in like she was still commanding troops in Afghanistan. At 48, Hayes moved with the purposeful stride of someone who'd led soldiers through combat zones and boardrooms with equal efficiency. Behind her came Dr. Michael Kim, Titan's brilliant CFO, and Sarah Washington, their razor-sharp legal counsel. The Titan team took their seats across from Sterling's group, and Jake immediately noticed Hayes scanning the room with tactical precision. "Where's Jake?" Hayes asked, her voice carrying the edge of someone who didn't waste time on pleasantries. Sterling's practiced smile faltered for just a moment. "General Hayes, I'll be personally handling the Titan relationship moving forward." Jake's no longer with the firm as of today. The silence that followed was deafening. Hayes leaned back in her chair, studying Sterling like he was a potential threat on a battlefield. Her steel-gray eyes moved from Sterling to the other partners, then back again. "You fired him," she said. "It wasn't a question. We made a strategic personnel decision to better align our. You fired him today, right before our meeting." Hayes' voice remained calm, but something underneath it made Sterling's collar look suddenly too tight. The same Jake Morrison who's worked 18-hour days for 16 months to make this deal happen. Sterling straightened, trying to reclaim control. "General, I understand this might seem surprising, but I assure you that Sterling Associates remains fully committed to Titan Industries. Having the managing partner directly involved will actually streamline." "Tell me about the synergy projections," Hayes interrupted. "I'm sorry, the synergy projections on page 47 of our agreement. Jake and I had several conversations about those numbers. He was very principled about keeping them realistic." Sterling's face went pale. Jake had mentioned those conversations, but Sterling had assumed they were just routine client management. Now he was beginning to understand that Hayes knew exactly why Jake had been fired. "Well, those numbers were perhaps a bit conservative. We could certainly explore more aggressive projections." Hayes stood up. Her entire team immediately followed suit. "General, please." Sterling shot to his feet, panic creeping into his voice. "Let's not allow personnel changes to interfere with what's clearly a beneficial transaction for all parties." Hayes walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. When she turned back, her expression was carved from stone. "Mr. Sterling, I spent 22 years in the United States Army. Rose to Brigadier General. Want to know what I learned in all those years of leading men and women in life or death situations?" Sterling nodded, though something in Hayes' tone suggested this wasn't really a question. "I learned that character is revealed under pressure. Jake Morrison showed character when he refused to inflate numbers that would have made your firm more money at my company's expense. You, Mr. Sterling, showed the opposite when you punished him for it. Now wait just a minute." Hayes held up her hand, and Sterling found himself stopping mid-sentence like a scolded recruit. "I'm not finished. In the Army, we call it integrity under fire. Doing the right thing even when it costs you something. Especially when it costs you something." She picked up her briefcase. "Jake Morrison demonstrated integrity under fire. You demonstrated why I can't trust Sterling Associates with my company's future." Sterling's voice cracked with desperation. "General, we have contracts, commitments, 16 months of work. We have unsigned documents, Mr. Sterling. And my signature isn't going on anything connected to a firm that just proved it doesn't understand the difference between leadership and management." As the Titan team headed for the door, Hayes paused and looked back at Sterling one final time. "When you see Jake Morrison again, and you will see him again, you might want to apologize. Because after today, he's the only person who can fix what you just broke." The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid. Sterling stood frozen, staring at the unsigned contracts scattered across the table. $680 million. 16 months of work. The deal that was supposed to cement his legacy as a master dealmaker. Gone in less than 10 minutes. Jake sat in a corner booth at Lou's Diner on Michigan Avenue, nursing his third cup of coffee and trying to process what had just happened. The retro diner, with its red vinyl seats and black and white checkered floor, felt like a refuge from the gleaming corporate towers that surrounded it. His phone had been buzzing non-stop, colleagues texting their shock, headhunters smelling opportunity, and his mom calling from Denver after somehow hearing the news through her mysterious network of friends. But the call he was waiting for came at exactly 4:15 p.m. "Jake, it's General Hayes. Where are you right now?" "Lou's Diner on Michigan. You know it. Meet me there in 10 minutes. We need to talk." Hayes arrived in a black Tesla Model S, still wearing her business armor, but looking less like a commanding officer and more like someone who'd just witnessed a train wreck. She slid into the booth across from Jake, declining the waitress's offer of coffee. "Now wait just a minute." Hayes held up her hand, and Sterling found himself stopping mid-sentence like a scolded recruit. "I'm not finished. In the Army, we call it integrity under fire. Doing the right thing even when it costs you something. especially when it costs you something. She picked up her briefcase. Jake Morrison demonstrated integrity under fire. You demonstrated why I can't trust Sterling Associates with my company's future. Sterling's voice cracked with desperation. General, we have contracts, commitments, 16 months of work. We have unsigned documents, Mr. Sterling. And my signature isn't going on anything connected to a firm that just proved it doesn't understand the difference between leadership and management. As the Titan team headed for the door, Hayes paused and looked back at Sterling one final time. When you see Jake Morrison again, and you will see him again, you might want to apologize. Because after today, he's the only person who can fix what you just broke. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid. Sterling stood frozen, staring at the unsigned contracts scattered across the table. $680 million. 16 months of work. The deal that was supposed to cement his legacy as a master dealmaker. Gone in less than 10 minutes. Jake sat in a corner booth at Lou's Diner on Michigan Avenue, nursing his third cup of coffee and trying to process what had just happened. The retro diner, with its red vinyl seats and black and white checkered floor, felt like a refuge from the gleaming corporate towers that surrounded it. His phone had been buzzing non-stop, colleagues texting their shock, headhunters smelling opportunity, and his mom calling from Denver after somehow hearing the news through her mysterious network of friends. But the call he was waiting for came at exactly 4:15 p.m. Jake, it's General Hayes. Where are you right now? Lou's Diner on Michigan. You know it. Meet me there in 10 minutes. We need to talk. Hayes arrived in a black Tesla Model S, still wearing her business armor, but looking less like a commanding officer and more like someone who just witnessed a train wreck. She slid into the booth across from Jake, declining the waitress's offer of coffee. That was quite a performance back there, Jake said. That wasn't a performance. That was me realizing I almost made the biggest mistake of my career. Hayes leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Sterling really thought he could just waltz in and take over our relationship like nothing happened. He's not exactly known for his self-awareness. Hayes laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no humor. Jake, I'm going to ask you something, and I need a straight answer. Are you interested in finishing what we started? Jake felt his pulse quicken. What do you mean? I mean Titan Industries still needs to complete this acquisition. The strategic rationale hasn't changed, the financing is in place, and the regulatory approvals are moving forward. What's changed is that we no longer trust Sterling Associates to handle it. Jake stared at her across the Formica table, understanding flooding through him like ice water. You're talking about me starting my own firm. I'm talking about you doing what you were born to do, without some silver spoon sociopath looking over your shoulder. Hayes pulled a leather portfolio from her briefcase. This is a letter of intent. Non-binding, but it commits Titan to working with your new firm once you're properly established. Jake opened the portfolio and scanned the document. The numbers were even better than the original Sterling deal. Hayes had actually increased the fee structure, recognizing that a boutique firm would provide more personalized service. Patricia, this is incredibly generous, but starting a new firm takes months. SEC registration, compliance infrastructure, operational setup. How long? 8 to 10 weeks if everything goes smoothly. Maybe longer if we hit regulatory delays. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. Jake, I've been in business for 15 years since I left the army. I've learned to spot two kinds of people. Those who make excuses and those who make things happen. Which one are you? The challenge hung in the air between them. Jake looked around the diner, at the construction workers grabbing dinner, the college students studying over burgers, the elderly couple sharing a piece of apple pie. Regular people pursuing their dreams with determination and hope. I'll need a team, Jake said finally. You can't run a proper MA practice alone. Who would you want? Jake's mind immediately went to the people he'd watched Sterling undervalue and overlook. Lisa Park from Goldman, she's the best financial analyst I've ever worked with, but she's tired of the big firm politics. Marcus Rodriguez from Compliance, he actually cares about doing things right. And Jessica Chen from Client Relations, she understands that relationships are built on trust, not transactions. Hayes smiled for the first time since entering the diner. Sounds like you've been thinking about this for a while. Maybe I have. What do you want to call it? Your firm. Your choice. Jake looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, where lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Somewhere in one of those gleaming towers, Robert Sterling was probably trying to figure out how to salvage the wreckage of his arrogance. Apex Partners, Jake said suddenly. Simple, direct, suggests reaching the highest level of performance. Hayes extended her hand across the table. Apex Partners it is. Welcome to entrepreneurship, Jake Morrison. As they shook hands, Jake felt something shift inside him. Not just the excitement of a new opportunity, but the recognition that Sterling's betrayal had actually freed him to become something better than he'd ever imagined possible. The real work was just beginning. Act 4. Building the Dream. Jake's studio apartment in Lincoln Park looked like a tech startup had exploded. His dining table groaned under the weight of legal documents, his laptop displayed multiple spreadsheets tracking regulatory requirements, and his whiteboard was covered with organizational charts and timeline projections. It had been 2 weeks since the Lou's Diner meeting, and Jake was learning that starting a financial services firm was like trying to build a skyscraper while riding a unicycle. Every solved problem revealed 3 new ones, and the SEC's paperwork requirements seemed designed by people who'd never actually worked in finance. His doorbell rang at exactly 7 a.m., Lisa Park arriving with 2 venti Starbucks coffees and a manila folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Please tell me that's not more regulatory paperwork, Jake said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Lisa laughed, settling into the chair across from his makeshift desk. At 28, she looked like she could be teaching economics at Northwestern instead of navigating the corporate jungle, wire-rimmed glasses, conservative blazer, and the kind of quiet confidence that came from being right about numbers when everyone else was wrong. Actually, it's good news. I've been running projections based on the Titan deal, and if we can close 3 more transactions of similar size within our first year, we'll be profitable by month 14. That's assuming we can get 3 more clients like Patricia Hayes. About that, Lisa opened her folder and pulled out a printed email. I got a call yesterday from David Chen at Midwest Manufacturing. Apparently, word is getting around about what happened at Sterling, and he's interested in discussing their upcoming acquisition strategy. Jake felt his first flutter of genuine excitement since the firing. David Chen ran a $2 billion industrial conglomerate and was known for his methodical approach to growth. If Chen was interested in Apex Partners, other executives would pay attention. The apartment door opened, and Marcus Rodriguez walked in carrying a box of Dunkin' Donuts and wearing the kind of satisfied expression that suggested good news. Tell me you've solved our compliance nightmares, Jake said. Marcus set down the donuts and pulled out his phone. Better than that. I just got off a call with my contact at the SEC. Our registration application is moving through the system faster than expected. Barring any complications, we should have approval within 6 weeks. Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. 6 weeks. The original estimate was 10 to 12. Turns out having a spotless regulatory record and detailed compliance protocols actually matters. Who knew? Marcus's grin was infectious. Oh, and there's one more thing. I may have heard through the grapevine that Sterling Associates is having some difficulties with their other client relationships. What kind of difficulties? The kind that happen when word gets around that you fired your best dealmaker right before closing a major transaction. Clients tend to wonder what else you might be hiding. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Jessica Chen. Emergency meeting needed. Big development. Can you meet at Navy Pier in an hour? The urgency in her message was unusual. Jessica was normally the calmest person he knew, the kind of professional who could handle crisis situations with the poise of a diplomat. If she was calling an emergency meeting, something significant had happened. An hour later, Jake found Jessica waiting by the Ferris wheel, her normally perfect composure replaced by barely contained excitement. Jake, we have a problem, she said without preamble. A good problem, but still a problem. What's going on? I've been getting calls. Lots of calls. Executives who've heard about Apex Partners and want to know if we're accepting new clients. Jessica pulled out her phone and scrolled through her call log. In the past 3 days, the CEO of Harrison Technologies, the CFO of Midwest Steel, the president of Great Lakes Transportation, and the founder of Chicago Biotech. Jake stared at the list, his mind racing through the implications. These weren't just any companies. They represented billions in potential transaction volume, the kind of client base that took established firms years to develop. They're all asking the same question, Jessica continued. When will we be fully operational? Because apparently, Robert Sterling's reputation is spreading faster than we anticipated. Jake looked out at Lake Michigan, where sailboats dotted the water like white birds against the blue expanse. 6 weeks ago, he'd been a senior associate at an established firm, secure in his career path and confident in his future. Now he was building something from scratch, with no guarantee of success and every reason to fail. But for the first time since Sterling's betrayal, Jake felt something more powerful than anger or determination. He felt unstoppable. Robert Sterling's corner office overlooked Chicago's financial district, but the view that usually filled him with pride now felt like a mockery. From his 42nd floor perch, he could see the building where David Chen's company was headquartered, the same David Chen who'd terminated his contract with Sterling Associates yesterday. The official reason was strategic realignment of advisory relationships. The real reason was Jake Morrison. Sterling's phone buzzed with yet another call from Williams in legal. The news was always the same. Another client reviewing their relationship, another deal in jeopardy, another reputation-damaging rumor circulating through Chicago's tight-knit business community. But this morning's call was different. "Robert, we have a bigger problem," Williams said, his voice tight with stress. "I just got off the phone with our contact at the SEC. Someone has filed a formal complaint about Jake Morrison's registration application." Sterling felt his pulse quicken. What kind of complaint? Questions about his departure from Sterling, concerns about potential conflicts of interest, requests for additional documentation regarding client relationships. The kind of complaint that could delay approval for months. And the source of this complaint? Anonymous. But it's detailed enough to suggest insider knowledge of our operations. Sterling ended the call and walked to his window, looking down at the street 42 floors below. He'd made that call to his contact at the SEC 3 days ago, carefully framing his concerns about a former employee who might be operating in regulatory gray areas. It was the kind of bureaucratic warfare that happened every day in the financial services industry. But now those same regulatory delays were giving him breathing room to fight back. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling, General Hayes is on line 1. Sterling's blood pressure spiked. He hadn't spoken to Patricia Hayes since the disastrous meeting 3 weeks ago, and he doubted she was calling to apologize. "Patricia, I'm glad you called. I've been hoping we could discuss." "Cut the crap, Robert." Hayes' voice was ice cold. "I know what you're doing. I'm not sure what you mean." The SEC complaint. The regulatory delays. The whisper campaign against Jake's new firm. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Sterling felt his carefully constructed facade cracking. "Patricia, I think you're mistaken. I spent 22 years in military intelligence before I became a CEO. I know what information warfare looks like, and I know who has the connections to wage it. You're trying to destroy Jake Morrison's career because he embarrassed you. That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation, Robert. It's a statement of fact. And here's another fact. It's not going to work." Sterling gripped the phone tighter. "Patricia, let's be realistic. Jake's new firm is facing months of regulatory delays. Titan Industries can't wait that long for your acquisition strategy. You need an established partner with proven capabilities. What I need is someone I can trust. And what you've proven over the past 3 weeks is that you're willing to use regulatory manipulation and character assassination to eliminate competition. That's not a business partner, Robert. That's a liability. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was not seeing who you really were sooner. Goodbye, Robert." The line went dead. Sterling stood at his window, looking out at the city where his reputation was crumbling one conversation at a time. In the distance, he could see Navy Pier, where tourists and families enjoyed the summer afternoon, blissfully unaware of the corporate warfare being waged in the towers around them. His phone rang again. This time it was Chen from operations, and his voice carried the kind of panic that meant very bad news. "Robert, we have a situation. The Titan deal. It's not the only one we're losing." Sterling closed his eyes. "How bad?" "Harrison Technologies terminated us this morning. Great Lakes Transportation is reviewing their options. And Midwest Steel just signed with a boutique firm that sounds suspiciously like Jake's new company." "That's impossible. Jake's firm doesn't even exist yet." "Apparently, word is getting around that it will exist soon. And that's enough for clients who've lost confidence in our judgment." Sterling ended the call and walked back to his desk, where quarterly projections glowed on his computer screen. Without the Titan deal and these other departing clients, Sterling Associates would miss their revenue targets by almost 40%. But worse than the financial impact was the reputational damage. In the insular world of Chicago finance, perception was reality. And the perception was becoming clear. Robert Sterling had destroyed his own company's credibility to settle a personal vendetta. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Sterling, there's a Jake Morrison here to see you. He says it's important." Sterling's blood ran cold. Jake Morrison was standing in his lobby, 3 weeks after being escorted out by security, asking for a meeting. This was either surrender or checkmate. "Send him up," Sterling said. Act 6, The Confrontation. Jake Morrison walked through the familiar corridors of Sterling Associates like he owned the place. The mahogany panels and oil paintings that had once impressed him now seemed like props in a theater production, expensive but ultimately hollow. He nodded to Sandra, Sterling's longtime assistant, who looked genuinely happy to see him despite the circumstances. The loyalty of support staff was often more revealing than any corporate communication, and Sandra's warm smile told Jake everything he needed to know about how Sterling's recent behavior was being received. Sterling's corner office looked exactly the same: leather furniture, crystal awards, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the city. But the man behind the desk looked like he'd aged 5 years in 3 weeks. "Jake," Sterling stood, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm glad you came. I think we both know this situation has gotten out of hand." Jake remained standing, ignoring the offered handshake. "Do we?" Sterling's smile faltered. "Look, I may have acted hastily in our last meeting. The pressure of managing the firm, the demands of our clients. Sometimes good people make decisions they regret." "Interesting theory." Jake walked to the window, looking down at the street where he'd walked after being fired, carrying nothing but his dignity and a growing sense of purpose. "Tell me about the SEC complaint." Sterling's face went pale. "I'm not sure what you're referring to." "The anonymous complaint questioning my regulatory fitness. The one filed by someone with detailed knowledge of Sterling Associates' internal operations. The one that's been delaying my firm's approval for the past 2 weeks." Sterling moved behind his desk, using the furniture as a barrier. "Jake, the SEC reviews all new applications thoroughly. I'm sure any delays are just part of the normal process." "Cut the bullshit, Robert." Jake's voice remained calm, but something in his tone made Sterling take a step backward. "I know it was you. Patricia Hayes knows it was you. And more importantly, the SEC is starting to figure out it was you. You can't prove." "I don't need to prove anything. You've already proven it yourself." Jake pulled out his phone and scrolled to a recording app. "Did you know that filing false regulatory complaints is a federal crime? Obstruction of justice, abuse of process, several other charges that carry serious jail time." Sterling's voice cracked. "Jake, let's be reasonable. We can work something out. Here's what's going to happen," Jake said, settling into the chair across from Sterling's desk with the casual confidence of someone holding all the cards. "You're going to withdraw your complaint. Today, you're going to stop interfering with my firm's approval process. And you're going to accept that your behavior over the past 3 weeks has consequences." "What consequences?" Jake smiled. Not the friendly expression of a former employee, but the predatory grin of someone who'd learned to play hardball from the best. "Harrison Technologies signed with Apex Partners yesterday. So did Midwest Steel and Great Lakes Transportation. David Chen's officially announced that Midwest Manufacturing is moving their business to us as well. Sterling slumped into his chair like a deflated balloon. That's over $1 billion in client relationships. 1.4 billion, actually. And that's just the beginning. Jake leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. You see, Robert, when you fired me in front of our colleagues, you taught me something valuable about power. You showed me that authority without respect is just noise. That fear without competence is just weakness. Jake, please. I'm not finished. You also taught me that sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting your enemies. Sometimes it's just being better than them. Building something they can't touch. Achieving something they can't match. Becoming someone they can never be. Jake stood and walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Oh, and Robert, Patricia Hayes asked me to give you a message. She said to tell you that integrity under fire isn't just a military concept. It's a business principle, and the market has a way of rewarding integrity while punishing its absence. As Jake left the office, he could hear Sterling's voice behind him, desperate, pleading, trying to negotiate from a position of complete weakness. But Jake didn't turn around. He had more important things to do. His phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. SEC approval came through. We're officially in business. Jake smiled as he waited for the elevator. Sometimes the best revenge was simply succeeding. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood in the sleek conference room of Apex Partners, looking out at the Chicago River as morning sunlight painted the water gold. The office occupied the entire 35th floor of a glass tower in the heart of the financial district, with clean lines, modern furniture, and technology that made Sterling Associates look like a museum. But the real difference wasn't in the decor. It was in the energy. Jake's team of 12 moved with the purposeful efficiency of people who believed in what they were building. No office politics, no backstabbing, no toxic power games. Just competence, integrity, and a shared commitment to doing right by their clients. Jake, you need to see this. Lisa called from her workstation, her voice carrying a mix of amazement and satisfaction. Jake walked over to find Lisa's computer displaying a news article from the Chicago Business Journal. The headline made him smile. Sterling Associates stock plunges 65% following SEC investigation into regulatory manipulation. It gets better, Lisa said, scrolling down to the article's meat. The SEC found evidence that Robert Sterling filed false complaints against multiple competitors, used his industry connections to delay regulatory approvals, and engaged in what they're calling systematic market manipulation. He's facing potential criminal charges. Jake read the article with growing amazement. Sterling's attempt to destroy Apex Partners had backfired spectacularly. The SEC investigation had uncovered a pattern of unethical behavior dating back years, including the inflation of deal values, misrepresentation of client relationships, and what appeared to be systematic fraud. There's more, Marcus said, walking over with his own laptop. 3 more of Sterling's major clients terminated their relationships this week. Word is getting around that the SEC is looking into every deal Sterling personally handled over the past 5 years. Jake shook his head in wonder. All because he couldn't handle being told no by a 26-year-old associate. Pride goeth before the fall, Jessica added, joining the group with a fresh cup of coffee. Speaking of which, we just got confirmation on the Patterson Industries deal. That's our 15th major transaction this year. Jake looked around at his team, brilliant, ethical professionals who'd chosen to build something new rather than accept something broken. In 6 months, they'd grown from 4 people working out of his apartment to a respected firm handling over $3 billion in transaction volume. His phone buzzed with a call from Patricia Hayes. Even 6 months later, her voice still carried the authority of someone who'd led troops through combat zones. Jake, I'm calling with news you're going to enjoy. I just got off the phone with the Chicago Business Association. They want to give you their Young Entrepreneur of the Year award. That's incredibly generous, but I'm not sure I deserve. Don't be modest. You took the worst professional betrayal imaginable and turned it into the foundation of something extraordinary. That's not luck, Jake. That's character. After Hayes hung up, Jake walked to the window and looked down at the street where he'd once walked as a fired employee with an uncertain future. The city looked the same, but everything else had changed. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Robert Sterling. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. You were right about everything. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." Jake stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some apologies came too late to matter, and some lessons were too expensive to teach twice. Instead, he pulled up the contact information for the 3 new analysts he was interviewing next week, young professionals who reminded him of himself 6 months ago. Talented, ambitious, and hungry for the chance to prove themselves in an environment that valued competence over politics. The best revenge, Jake had learned, wasn't destroying your enemies. It was making them irrelevant. Outside his window, Chicago hummed with the energy of ambition and opportunity. And somewhere in the city, in boardrooms and coffee shops and university classrooms, the next generation of leaders was preparing to take on the world. Jake Morrison smiled and got back to work. He had an empire to build.